Okay, so on page 95 it tells you the procedure to follow when you're going to clean the X-ray cassette. All right, now we're going to go on to page 103. And we're going to talk about density. Density is a term that describes how dark the X-ray film is. All right, on page 103 in the book, and on page 3 of the notes, it mentions density. Here it says density is the amount of black metallic silver on the film after development. Okay. In other words, how dark does your X-ray turn out? If we take an X-ray of someone's hand, for example, okay, you're going to have a black border around the hand. So all of this is going to be black here. Then the bones would be white. Okay. And then this area would actually be clear, sort of like a tinted pair of sunglasses, but you can see through them, okay? Because all of that silver halide crystals that's on the film all gets attracted to that one area where you have your light, okay? If you set your collimator to be this big, all of this silver from here is going to go towards it like a magnet, okay? But remember, your bones are going to block it out. So that's why your bones show up white, or kind of a whitish gray, and then the border is black. So the density is how dark is that black area. Okay. Now, you're also going to have some areas in the bones. They're not going to be completely white. Some of them are going to be kind of gray, maybe a little bit towards the black side. Depending on how dark it is, that's how much density you have. You don't want your picture to come out too dark. What's a problem with having too much density?
The bones will show up,
right? Yeah, you can't see the bones like you should, so you might not see where there's a break in the bone. All right, 3 things control the density, and this gets confusing, and this is where people miss a lot of questions on the test. These 3 things control density. In other words, if you change one of these, you can change the density dramatically. Okay, you can make the density be a lot darker or a lot lighter. Okay, when it's darker, it's called more dense. When it's lighter, it's called less dense. All right, first of all, the milliamps. Remember, the more MA that you use, the more radiation. So which one is going to be more radiation, 50 milliamps or 150? 150. Okay. So when you increase, I just put an arrow up. When you increase the milliamps, you increase density, which means darker. Okay, so if I have 2 X-rays that I'm going to take of a hand, and I use 50 MA on one and 100 MA on the other, the one with 100 MA is going to be darker or more dense. The one with 50 MA is going to be lighter. So if you decrease the milliamps, you decrease the density. You make it lighter. Does that make sense? It's just like, once again, baking a cake. If you bake it at 350 and then you bake another one at 600, the one at 600 is probably going to burn. It's going to get too dark. All right, the time. The time does the same thing. If you increase the time, what do you think it's going to do to the density? Is it going to go up or down? It's going to go up. It's going to increase. Okay, sort of like sitting outside on the beach. Who's going to get a worse sunburn? Someone who sits out there for an hour or someone who sits out there for 3 hours?
Yeah.
Right, so the longer you're exposed to the radiation, the darker it's going to be. Okay? So you increase time, you increase density. You decrease time, you decrease density. This one is what it gets really confusing, the distance, your SID. Okay, remember we use either 40 inches for extremities, or what? How many inches do we use for chest X-ray? 72. All right. All right, so there's the X-ray tube, and that's the patient under it. All right, we want to keep it at 40 inches. Now, if we decrease our distance, decreasing the distance means we're going to bring the tube down closer to the patient. But right, you're going to get a higher density. So this actually does the opposite. When you increase distance, you decrease density. And when you decrease the distance, you increase the density. So whatever you do to one, it's the opposite to the other. All right, so in other words, if you decrease your distance, that means you're getting closer to the patient with your X-ray tube. It's going to be darker. Okay? If you increase the distance, you're pulling it further away, it's going to end up being lighter. Okay? So you have to know how these three things can control how dark your X-ray comes out. Okay? So just changing one of these things can make it a lot darker or a lot lighter. So that takes you to page 4 on these notes. All right, at the top of page 4, it mentions this SID, the 40 inches and 72. Remember, there's two other abbreviations that mean the same thing as SID. TFD and FFD. They're all the same. Now, there's other things that you can do that will affect how dark your film comes out. We talked about changing the KVP 15%. Okay, but also remember the grids. This can be another confusing question. Grid ratio. All right, remember you have different grid ratios. It tells you how effective your grid is. All right, which one do we want to go with? If we had those three choices, which one is the best one? Right, it's the 12:1. It's always the highest one. Okay, this is the best one. The higher the number, the best. All right, now, if I ask you which one of these would give you a more dense X-ray, which one would it be? The 8:1. Why do you say that? Right. The 8:1 is not as good as filtering out radiation, the scatter, as the 10:1 or 12:1. So that's going to give you a darker picture, which is more dense. So this would give you the most dense X-ray. This would give you the least dense. So as you increase the grid ratio, you decrease the density. In other words, the higher the number, the lighter your X-ray is going to turn out.